Right, welcome to another On Base Baseball video. My name is Brian Hafferkamp, and I am the designer of On Base Baseball. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the new roster sheets and the decade roster sheet sets and how to play those. Maybe it may not be as intuitive, maybe, as some people might think, but it's actually very simple. It actually simplifies playing the game quite a bit. There are no cards involved, and so there's nothing to cut out or anything like that. They're just sheets and sheets and sheets of data. And so we're going to play the 1986 Mets at the Expos. It's going to be Bobby Ojeda on the mound against Bryn Smith, and I'm actually going to play this game, but I wanted to take you from the beginning so that you can see how to take the data from the roster sheets and just put it onto the on-base scorecard. So I have my on-base scorecard here, and what makes this unique is it's got a place for the player's number, the name, the position, and then how the batter bats. That's not going to be particularly important to me in this game, but if you're playing any types of splits, that would be important. But these three values here are the batting runs, the defense, and the speed, which, of course, for the batters are the three main values that we use to calculate the results, the outcomes. And so those are all represented on our sheets. So I printed out a couple of sheets. Tried to find a couple of teams that are close to each other so I can just print out their sheets one after another. So for New York, Lenny Dykstra is leading off, and we have all of our batters and pitchers both. They're all separated by a team. So I put them all on their teams. And generally, they are using the weighted runs created plus. So that's the first batter. So you can see here with the Mets, it's John Gibbons. He's a 282 weighted runs created plus. And then it sort of goes down from there. So Dave Magadan, who didn't get very many at-bats that year. So that's a little bit of a false one. But the first person with enough at-bats that year is Keith Hernandez with a 35 batting runs. He's a 0.1 on defense, so just barely above average. And you would call him an average defender, but in our game, he's going to be a plus and not a minus. So that's, you only have to creep over to the plus side. And then his speed is a 2.5, so I would drop him down to a 2. So he would be a 2 speed. You can round up. You can do that however you want to with the speed, and so that's up to you. So we would have Keith Hernandez here, and you got all of his lines here, and so he's at a 146 weighted runs created plus, which is all-star level. It's not Babe Ruth or Mike Trout, at their 180 or 190. It's not Juan Soto. It's not that type of level, but it's definitely all-star level, and they've got several players here who are up above 130, which is, those are going to be your sort of upper crust players. So they have Mitchell, Dykstra, Strawberry, and Hernandez all sort of up there. But the point is, all of your best players, your best hitters, are probably going to be sort of going from the top to the bottom. They are not in alphabetical order. But they're in order probably of best players first, last players last. And so I think we have enough batters here. I don't think that we actually have, there's probably 2 or 3 pitchers on the other side. And we do have Bobby Ojeda here, which is good. And we've got some of their relievers here. If I need to look somebody up, I can look it up on my digital roster sheets. But essentially what you do is for Lenny Dykstra, we're just looking for Lenny, and hopefully here he is. And so he's a 20.3 batting runs, a positive defender, and a 7.7. So I might round him up to an 8. Probably not. Probably round him down to a 7. He's not quite in the elite. 8 would be an elite, and he's stole 31 bases, so he's got good speed. He's a good base runner, but he's not quite elite. Where only one, if he was an 8, only a roll of a 9 would get him out. And so I don't never seen Lenny Dykstra being that kind of player. But he's got a lot of hustle, and he made a lot of plays on the base paths. So Lenny Dykstra is first on our sheet. You can't see him up there, but trust me that he's there. So I would write down a 20 for his batting runs. I would write down a plus for his defense, and then a 7 for his speed. And essentially, you're going to just fill out all of these. You're going to use this sheet to fill out all of the players who are playing. If you have any substitutes, you'll look on here. You'll find their values. You'll transfer them to this sheet here. And then once everything is on the scorecard, you're good to go to play the game. You won't need these unless you just want to use them for evaluative purposes, to say, which player do I want to bring in. It's got a listing you can see of all their stats. So you can see the stats here, all across. These are the same exact statistics that are on the cards. So if you have the 98 season, you have the 2019 season, they're the same ones. So we have their main values. We have all of their sort of their core batting values, and those are represented here. So average, we have sort of their value, advanced statistic values here. On base, slugging, OPS, WOBA, weighted runs created plus their WAR, and so you have sort of your top level sabermetric stats. And then here, starting with their games, and you even have how many at bats that they had. So you can actually see, was this a player who got into the game? Did they have enough at bats? Once you get down here to Darryl Strawberry, you finally get into somebody with 500 at bats. So you can see who the regulars are. You can generally see who the backups are or the platoon players are, even if you don't know the players very well. You can see their average home runs, RBIs, doubles, triples, etc. Stolen bases, caught stealing. So you can just sort of get a good gauge of what sort of player that is, even if you're unfamiliar with them. And then for this game, I'll be using the 1980s game engine chart. So I have gone back through and made some changes to this. It's very similar to the 70s, with a few differences going through it, but for the most part it's probably going to play very similar to the 1970s. So let me go ahead and fill out the rest of the players here, and then we'll go ahead and play the game. Okay, so I've filled in all of my players here. And I didn't walk you through the pitchers side here, but you can see the pitchers. I've got Montreal and New York mostly on the same, but on this one I printed both sides. So you can see the rest of the New York pitching staff here. Both of our pitchers are on this page. So we have Bryn Smith somewhere here. There he is. And then we have Bobby Ojeda right here. Now you can see that their FIP is here in this first column, and then their stamina is in the second column. So both values that you need to play the game are listed right there by their name and by their team. And the way I usually put it onto the scorecard is like this. I just put it out to the side. I put their FIP, and then I put their stamina rating. I don't actually have a place for that in the pitcher slots. I guess I could put that in there, but I haven't updated this sheet for a while. But you have their rating here, their FIP value, and that's going to determine which column that they pitch out of, and then their stamina obviously is going to determine which batters are, how many batters they can go, I guess. Okay, so we have our sound turned off on the other phone, which is good. I'm going to be using the on-base dice roller here. You can see all you can do is click roll, and it gives you all the values that you need in order to play the game. I have the scorecard over here, and then here is sort of our main, the main chart that we're going to use for everything. Again, this is updated for the 1980s decade, the 1980s era of baseball. And what I've done with that is essentially I've taken every player from 1980 to 89, pulled them out into a spreadsheet, and then pulled out every player who had a season of 30 plus batting runs, and just discarded everyone else. Went through and did the averages or percentages for home run percentage and singles and doubles and triples and walks and strikeouts. And then I have a little sort of player creator where I also do the average number of plate appearances. So I input how many plate appearances. I have a little dice roller that will roll that many times. It'll roll this specific, like I'm using the same roll setup as this. So I'm rolling the 2d6s 600 times or 542 times or whatever the average plate appearances is for someone with a 30 plus batting runs. And then I take those numbers, separate them out into 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. So every time one of those numbers hits, it adds 1 to that. So after 600 rolls or however many rolls they are, I have a number. You know, it might be 12 times a hit on a 1, 1. It might be 32 times a hit on a 1, 2. And so I fill that in. I do it twice. I average those, and then and then I use those numbers. I use that average number for each roll over however many hundreds of at bats. I use that number to inform, sort of like create a player, I guess. So I go through and I try to manipulate, where in this sheet, because a 2-2 is about a 2.5% chance. If you roll out 1,000 times, it almost is exactly 2.5%. If you roll out 100,000 times, it's very close to 2.5%. And then any other number that's not a double is 5%. So you sort of can match up home run percentages, watt percentages, K percentages, pretty close, just by following that general rule. And that's why you'll see oftentimes the 66 is a home run or an 11. It's because that's only a 2.5% chance. And for a lot of, weaker hitters, that's what their chance at hitting a home run is. For hitters in this category, often I think the average for the 80s was 4% or 5%. So you're just trying to get yourself into that area. That's why you see a home run here at 36. So there's a 5% chance basically on a roll. If you rolled without the pitcher and you just rolled for the hitter, there would be a 5% chance of hitting a home run. Over here, basically, it's a 2.5% chance. And then here for a home run, is it the same? Yeah, same, a 2.5% chance, but a lot of times an 11 for some reason comes up less than even a 33. So even within the doubles, unless you have an excessive amount of rolls, so if you roll for 10,000 games, 10,000 rolls, those are going to come out almost equal. But if you roll, 7 at bats, then the odds are going to be in favor of the 33 hitting more than the 11. I don't really understand how that works. Maybe it's just the way that the dice roller works, but I try to use the same dice roller for the testing and for the creating the players that I use for the real game, so that I'm sort of comparing apples to apples. Not every random generator is the same. Not everyone uses the same algorithm, so it can be different. It's not totally just like any two pair of dice. It's not the same. You can roll with one set, roll with another set, and it won't come out the same, even though theoretically it should be the same. And then over here you see that there's a chance of a chance. So you have a 2.5% chance of either a single or a home run, and then within that there's only a 33% chance that of that 2.5% that it can be a home run. And so generally players over here are at 1% or less for their home runs, and so that's sort of how I get to splitting those columns, or splitting that particular outcome. Same thing with the doubles and triples. You'll notice that these are split as well, because you get two double chances here. So there's a 5% or a 2.5% plus a portion of another 2.5%. Generally, doubles land anywhere at 4 to 5% on any given decade or year. And that has not changed. I did some research and put that on the Delphi forums, and that doubles percentage has stayed at 4 or 5% for 100 years. It's just, that's where it is, So it's somewhere in that range, and it changes a little bit. So it's harder to hit a triple for someone at the lower end. And for these other batters, their triple percentage was at 1, almost 1%. Again, that's another value that throughout the history of baseball has basically stayed the same, 1% all the way through from the 1920s. And then again, so you can figure all kinds of things. So you have a single, so that's 5%, 7.5%, 10%, and then there's another one up here for another 5, so about 15%. Do I have another one? Can I get another single? So for these players here, it's about 15.5%, maybe 16%. Singles often will come in, depending on the era, anywhere between 14 and 17% of all base hits, of all plate appearances, are singles. So not 15% of all base hits, 15% of all plate appearances. So this is what we're gauging all of these home runs, doubles, triples, singles against plate appearances. Same thing with a walk. So here you see there's 5%, 10%, and okay, and then it's about 12.5% in this 30 plus. So one characteristic of high batting runs hitters is that they walk a lot, they get on base a lot. And it doesn't matter the era. These are high batting runs players, and they have a similar profile regardless who they are. They have a very high on base average. They have a very high slugging average. That's how their OPS gets so high, is their on base plus their slugging. So typically these batters have a high OPS. They have a high WOBA, and therefore they have a high weighted runs created plus as well, just because they're creating more runs than the average player. So that's sort of how the chart bears itself out. The same thing happens here with the pitchers. Obviously, there are fewer things to manipulate with pitchers. You have K percentage, walk percentage, hit by pitch percentage, which that, like triples, hit by pitch percentage basically stays at 1 for the history of baseball. K percentage has swung quite a bit. Walk percentage has swung quite a bit. Home run percentage has swung quite a bit. So on the pitcher side, actually a lot of things have moved quite a lot, much more than on the hitter side, where if you move from the 20s to the modern day baseball, you've gone from a 1% home run percentage in the 20s to 3% now. So that's a 300% move in the average home run percentage for a batter. But some of these strikeout percentages have moved from 10 to 21, over 21% just last year, or in 2021. So you're talking about a exponentially larger increase in strikeouts as opposed to an increase in home runs, which we have seen an increase in both. But in terms of real numbers and percentages, both, it's a lot more than it ever has been. And in fact, it just continues. It's continued from the 1960s to now. Just the line just trends straight up. So not quite hockey stick, but in the past 2 decades, it's taken a significantly sharper incline. So what I do is I do the same thing. I take all the pitchers from that era, I separate them out by their columns, and then I figure out what's the walk percentage for players who are in this column, what's the K percentage, what's the home run percentage, and then I set that against the average of all batters, because these guys are going to be facing every type of batter, right? So the batter, when I'm figuring him, I don't necessarily have to put him against every kind of pitcher, although I guess I could. But for the pitchers, every time they go out, they're going to be facing every type of batter. So, just in the Expos lineup, you have a -8 batting runs, a 14, a 38, a 13, a -4, a -11, -13, -13, -7. So you basically have every column represented, and you're going to have to sort of average them against all of those. So I take all of these batters from 1980 to 89. I figure out what's the average home run percentage for all batters. What's the average what else do I do? K percentage, walk percentage, home run percentage. And then I figure out what the percentages are for the batter or the pitcher in this column. And then I go, okay, for pitchers in this column, I need to bump them up a little bit. Their strikeout percentage goes up by 3 percentage points over the average. So I need to make sure that I am bumping them up 3% if I can. Obviously it's not an exact science. There's a lot of variables in play because you're rolling dice, and so there's sort of this randomness to it. But you're trying to swing the playing field toward more strikeouts. Even though on a game-by-game basis, maybe you might have one game where Doc Gooden strikes out 2, you might have one game where he strikes out 9. That actually happens in real life. Jacob deGrom doesn't strike out 14 every time he goes out to play, but he does strike out 14 sometimes, and sometimes quite regularly. So you need to sort of make sure that these players, especially in these high columns, are performing, because I think that's the ones that everyone's going to be like, I don't know, Strawberry hit 2 home runs over the course of 162 games. It's probably not a very good game, which I would agree. And so his percentage needs to be in the realm of possibility for that to happen, even though that there's going to be some swing. He might hit 39 one year, he might hit 29 one year, he might hit 34 another. So that's to the randomness of the game. That's to which pitchers come in against him. So we have that for each of these columns. You can see here that this is almost league average. There was a little bit of a difference, fewer strikeouts for pitchers in this column, but they were still getting outs, right? So their FIP is under 4.25, so it's definitely under the average, and 2 right at average. And so pitchers in this column had fewer strikeouts than the average for batters. Pitchers in this column had quite a few more strikeouts, so they get a couple more opportunities. That's 2.5%. That's 2.5%. So a 5% bump in the opportunity to strike out a batter. And this one here is strategically placed to take away some hits as well. So that's another part, is the matrix goes two ways. One is up and down, one is across. So you always have to see what's being taken away. So there are fewer strikeouts here than the average, and so you have to get rid of strikeouts, but also keep the positive plays for the pitcher, right? So here's a ground out. Instead of a double play or a strikeout, it becomes a ground out. So you don't get the benefit of the strikeout. You don't necessarily get the benefit of the double play, even though you can still try to turn the double play, which is what I typically do. And here you get a positive play for the offense. So instead of a double play or a strikeout, you get a single. So we needed to take away some strikeouts from this column, because they generally have lower than average strikeout rates. And then we take away the strikeout by adding a stopper here, and then also it's an advantage for the offense, because normally you would strike out, you would make it some sort of out here, at least one, sometimes two, and instead you have a positive play of a single. So pitchers in this column need to be adjusted a little bit differently, because they're giving up more hits, right, and fewer strikeouts. And then this column, we had to get more walks in the game, so we're trading a K for a walk. So it's a positive play for the offense. It also gets rid of strikeouts, and then we have they have a higher home run percentage generally than the average. So we need to get this home run in here, which it's going to be a home run here anyway. So we're really bumping up these three, which should bump up your home run percentage, because that's one out or two outs and one not home run play, right? So we get a little bump in home runs from players who are in this column. Now the flip side is you're not going to find a lot of players in this column. So that's kind of the flip side to playing with these older classic teams, is that, just looking through here, you can see you got one guy here, Dennis Burt. Dennis Burt was in for 2 innings in 1986, and he has a 1277 FIP. Vance Law got in. He's obviously not a pitcher, but he did throw 4 innings. Good job for Vance Law, the third baseman for the Montreal. And so he has a 4.27, so he's not even he's in the third column, not the fourth. So even the position players are coming in, and they're not even in the final column. But most of these guys are going to be in sort of your first or second column, and that's funny about Vance Law. They're mostly going to be pitching from these first 3 columns. So in the classic season, in the 70s, it's even more pronounced than that. You might get the occasional rookie who came in for 2 or 3 innings, something like that, who just gets blown up for a couple of innings. But otherwise, the normalized pitchers, the pitchers who got in for 20, 30, 40 innings plus, are generally going to be in these 2 middle columns. And then you have your sort of Tom Seaver, Nolan Ryan type aces. Even in, I don't even know if Nolan Ryan made it into the top column back then, but definitely your top level relievers. Who do we have here? For Montreal, Randy St. Clair would be here, but he only had 20 innings pitched. Andy McGaffigan, had 140 innings, but had a great year, 14-10, 265 FIP. 333. So he would just sort of sneak in here. Floyd Yeomans, Bob Ochinko, Kurt Brown, and so some of these guys only got a handful of innings that year. But it doesn't matter, they get rated the same, and so you just pitch them out of these columns. If you want to throw a guy who only threw 15 innings and you want to give him 180 innings, you could do that. That's sort of, most people would see as cheating, because that's more usage than he would have had. Would he have had that 288 FIP if he had had 180 innings? Maybe not. Who knows? But if you're using them similarly, then they should sort of hit that FIP. Because these are real numbers, they're not made up or projections. They're actually based on their production. So that's how I figure the two different sides. I didn't mean for this video necessarily to go down that road, so I think I'll just stick there and then play out this game maybe later. But there is a method to the madness here. There's a lot of research that goes into it. I built some tools along the way just so that I can do better role research and get a little bit closer. Sure, I can just go by the percentages and just say, oh, well, that's 6%, so we need one here and a little bit here. But I can get a little bit more granular than that, and I've tried to do that with the 98 set and some of these newer game engine charts. So always trying to improve this chart, because this chart is really the heart of on-base baseball. This is the game engine. I'm giving it to you. You essentially can just get it. If you watch enough of the videos, you could stop it and make your own if you wanted to. You can take mine and you can manipulate it to be any kind of baseball universe that you want it to be. But the game is meant for you to take this engine and create the game that you want to create. So you're not stuck. If you want to use defense for base running, or you want to use base running for defense, or whatever you want to do, it doesn't matter. You can make your own universe. You can make the values be what you want. With these roster sheets, I'm giving you a lot more data. And it's in a little bit more consumable format as far as other statistics and things like that. You can actually see and get a better feel, because this is how we read statistics for baseball generally. And so you get a better feel for the player than maybe if you're just reading off the card. It's kind of the way they're presented. It's a little bit different than the way we normally present statistics for baseball. So maybe it's a little harder to understand what kind of player the player is. Yeah, well, I think that's good. So we have our starting lineups. We have everything filled out. You can see that I went through and I filled in their batting runs here, and whether they're a plus and minus defender here, and then their speed here. And essentially, if the player is like if this was a 2.9 on his speed, I would round him up to a 3, because he's essentially a 3. If he's a 2.6, I would probably round that down. So I'm just trying to think, it's splitting hairs with a guy who's a 2 or a 3. But if you get a guy like this, who's a Tim Raines, who's an 8, which I think his speed on this sheet was, what was it? It wasn't quite there. Let's see. Tim Raines is here. So his speed is a 7.9. I don't know if you can see that very well. So it has a 7.9 speed rating. To me, that makes him an 8. But the difference is 10 percentage points on being able to steal. So when you roll, or more than that, 11%. So every number that goes up for the steals is 11%. But he also stole 70 bases and was only caught 9 times. So to me, that puts you into that percentage where you only need one, I don't know what that is. I guess we could figure that percentage really quickly. So you're talking about 88%. 88.6 is his steal percentage. So that's his success percentage. So to me, 8 and times 11 is 88. So to me, that makes sense. He should have an 88% chance to steal that bag. The league average is going to be about 70 to 75%. 5%. Back then, it was about 65%, 68%. So it's a little bit, the caught stealing percentage went up back then. It's actually been steadily going down, and the success percentage has been going up steadily since the 1970s, probably. So, to me, marking him as a 77% chance or an 88% chance, his numbers, 70 out of 79, reflect an 88% chance. So that's why I'm going to bump him up, because I know he's an elite base stealer. So if I have a chance to bump him or manipulate him up, now you only have 1 out of 9. That's your percentage to get him. At least going to second base. Going to third base, then he comes down to a 77% chance of going home. It's only 66%, which is good and better than most. But there's still that opportunity as he makes his way around the bases to get him if he tries to go to third. But going to second base, you almost can't stop Rock Reigns. So Henderson is the same way. Lou Brock is the same way. There are some players that once they get to first base, you can almost give them second, which is how it was in real life. You can almost give them second base. They just were that dominant and that hard to catch. So I want that to be reflected in the game, even though the base stealing metric is sort of the mechanism is kind of basic. I want the numbers to be reflected as much as possible. An 11% swing is a lot from one number to another. Most of the other values, there's not that much swing with them, but with the base running, there is that kind of a swing, just because we're only using a 1 to 9. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. That's real back end stuff on the game. And I know some of you find this really fascinating. Some of you are just like, let's play the game. So to me, it's fascinating to create the game, to think about how can I represent this? How can I represent baseball on a two-dimensional space using dice or using cards or using whatever sort of mechanism to make that play happen that I have. So to me, building the game is a lot more fun necessarily than playing the game, but I know that I'm building this for you to play, and I want it to be fun, and I want it to be relatively accurate and to be in the realm of possibility. That's what I've always sort of told people and been going for, is I want it to be realistic, but also to have, the randomness of 1, baseball, 2, cards and dice. And so there's an element of randomness, but you want the table to be tipped into the right directions. You don't want, these guys in this -5 column hitting 32 home runs. So that's not the way that baseball is. Those hitters are not, they're getting that low value because they're not hitting home runs, right? So that's your pitchers over here. They might poke one out every once in a while, which is reflected. Every once in a while, I've had someone hit one out of this column, but it doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, they're making outs or hitting singles, which is what people in that column do. So I just want it to be reflected well in the game, so that when you look, you're like, everything seems like it's right, like it's within the realm of possibilities. So that is On Base Baseball as it's moving. I'll be releasing this 1980s roster set soon. I'm going to play test a few more times, and then just to make sure that I don't have anything screwy with the roster sheets. But I did the roster sheets essentially in a few hours, and that seems to be the way that it can go for me. So these roster sheets should be coming out sort of hard and heavy over the next month or two, and then maybe I will combine them together, and you have the entire history of baseball and be able to play with on-base baseball. That's sort of the end goal for these decade roster sheets, is you have everything from as far back as I can go reliably to modern day baseball to 2020. We're in a decade. We haven't finished a decade, and you'll have that to be able to play. You can either buy them all individually as decades, or buy the decades you want, or you'll be able to buy them as full sets, and maybe I'll even sell them as eras. So, you have the live ball era, the dead ball, the I don't know, the different modern eras of baseball. So that would be pretty cool, and so we'll see how that develops over this season. It's good to see spring training baseball, see real baseball being played. Love it, and I think that's it. All right, I gotta get to work, but thanks for watching. It's been a long video. It's got a lot of sort of dry stuff. This isn't what I was expecting, but sometimes that's how these things turn out. So that's where we are. And if you have any questions or comments, or any questions about how I do the game engine, any suggestions about how I can make it better, just put them down in the comment section below. I'm always trying to make this game better. There's some additions here that weren't there last year, so just trying to listen to feedback from people and what they're talking about, and really getting into the numbers of it to make sure that I have an accurate game that also plays well. So I think that's everybody's goal when they make a baseball game. So don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to keep video content coming out as much as I can, and I appreciate those who have subscribed already. If you click the bell after you subscribe, then you'll get notifications either on your app, the YouTube app, or to your email, whatever your preferences are, and you'll get notified whenever I have a new video that comes out. All right. I think that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.